On a stormy night, a secluded mansion becomes the stage for a daring plan, but no one expected that the most unlikely guardian would reveal an instinct that changes everything. The morning mist danced lazily among the pine trees surrounding the imposing manor of the Richardson family, like an ethereal curtain protecting the secrets those walls had guarded for decades. Mrs. Eleanor observed the landscape through the living room window, a porcelain cup in her delicate hands, while the steam from her tea mixed with the cold June air in Pinewood. At 72, she maintained the elegant posture that had always characterized her, even in the solitude that had become her constant companion since Richard had departed. The manor, once the stage for grand gatherings of the regional elite, now echoed only with her soft footsteps and the occasional sound of Thunder's paws on the wooden floor. "Good morning, my old companion," she murmured, extending her hand to caress the head of the German shepherd that had approached silently. Thunder, with his 11 well-lived years, still maintained the majestic bearing and alert eyes that Richard had so admired. The dog had been personally trained by the sheriff in the golden days of his career, and even in old age, he preserved an impressive military discipline. The sound of the doorbell echoed through the manor, breaking the contemplative silence of the morning. Eleanor furrowed her brow. She wasn't expecting visitors, and Martha, her trusted housekeeper, had warned that she would arrive later that day. Thunder immediately positioned himself beside his mistress, ears erect in alert position. Who could it be at this hour? She thought, walking slowly to the main door. Through the side window, she spotted a young brunette woman approximately 30 years old, holding a small travel bag and smiling timidly. "Mrs. Eleanor?" "It's me, Stephanie. Your niece," said the young woman when the door opened, revealing a warm smile and eyes that sparkled with a familiarity that Eleanor couldn't quite place in her memory. "Stephanie?" repeated the old lady, trying to connect that face to the sparse memories of distant family gatherings. "Whose daughter, dear?" "Cousin Isabel's, auntie. You may not remember me much. I was quite little when we met. I was passing through Pinewood and thought it would be a good opportunity for us to get to know each other better," explained Stephanie, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear with what seemed to be a nervous gesture. Eleanor noticed that Thunder hadn't approached the visitor as he usually did with people. On the contrary, the dog maintained a respectful distance but observed each movement of the young woman with an intensity that left her slightly uneasy. "Come in, child, it's cold outside," she said, making room for Stephanie to pass. "I don't usually receive unannounced visits, but family is always welcome." The manor revealed all its grandeur as they walked down the main corridor. The walls adorned with old photographs told decades of history, and Stephanie seemed to absorb every detail with an almost voracious interest. "Wow, Auntie, what a magnificent place. You must feel like a queen here," commented Stephanie, her eyes scanning the antique furniture and carefully positioned artwork. "It was your uncle, Richard, who had a taste for these antiques," replied Eleanor, a pang of longing crossing her voice. "He used to say that each piece had a story to tell." "And you live here alone, aren't you afraid?" asked Stephanie, and there was something in the way she asked the question that made Eleanor hesitate for a moment. "I have Thunder," she said, simply, observing how the dog continued to keep his distance from the visitor. "And Martha comes every day. Pinewood is a quiet town, there's nothing to worry about." While preparing a snack for her unexpected niece in the spacious kitchen, Eleanor wondered why she couldn't clearly remember Stephanie. Her memory had always been excellent, and she rarely forgot a familiar face. There was something about the young woman that intrigued her. Perhaps it was the way her eyes seemed to catalogue each room, each valuable object, as if she were mentally mapping the place. "You have a beautiful library," said Stephanie, returning to the kitchen after exploring the house. "Your uncle was a very cultured man, from what I've heard." "Richard read a lot, mainly about history and law. It was his passion," replied Eleanor, serving tea in 2 porcelain cups. "He spent hours in that library, especially in his later years." Thunder remained lying near the kitchen door, but his eyes didn't stray from Stephanie for even a second. The dog's behavior was beginning to awaken a growing uneasiness in Eleanor, who knew every nuance of her faithful companion's temperament. "Auntie, I hope you don't mind. but I need to stay in Pinewood for a few days. Is there a hotel you would recommend?" asked Stephanie, stirring her tea with delicate movements. "Nonsense, child, you'll stay here. We have plenty of spare rooms, and it will be a joy." "To have company," replied Eleanor, surprising herself with her own generosity. Something in her instinct told her to be cautious, but her upbringing and loneliness spoke louder. The smile that spread across Stephanie's face seemed genuinely grateful, but there was a satisfaction behind it that Eleanor couldn't completely decipher. As she showed the guest room to her niece, the old lady wondered if she was making the right decision. That night, for the first time in months, Thunder didn't sleep in his usual bed in the living room. Instead, he positioned himself strategically at Eleanor's bedroom door, as if standing guard against some invisible danger that only his instincts could detect. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give us a like. Tell us what city you're watching from. We'll continue. The first rays of sunlight filtered through the lace curtains when Eleanor awoke with the sensation of having slept poorly. Thunder was still in his sentinel position, but upon seeing her awake, he approached the bed with an affectionate gesture, as if wanting to reassure her. "Good morning, my faithful knight," she whispered, scratching behind the dog's ears. "You also sensed something strange yesterday, didn't you?" The manor had awakened with a different energy. There were footsteps downstairs, the sound of doors being opened and closed, and an aroma of coffee that wasn't prepared by her hands. Eleanor put on her silk robe and descended the stairs, finding Stephanie in the kitchen completely at ease preparing breakfast. "Good morning, Auntie. I hope you don't mind, but I woke up early and thought I'd repay your hospitality," said Stephanie, cheerfully, but there was something forced about her enthusiasm. "I made scrambled eggs, toast, and strong coffee, just the way Americans like it." "How kind of you, dear," replied Eleanor, observing how the young woman moved about the kitchen with an intriguing familiarity. "But you didn't need to go to the trouble?" While they sat at the table, Eleanor noticed that Stephanie asked many questions about the routine of the house. When Martha arrived, when she usually went for walks, if she had neighbors who visited regularly. All the questions seemed innocent enough, but their frequency awakened a certain uneasiness in the older lady. "You have a very organized life," commented Stephanie, breaking a piece of toast with delicate gestures. "It must be comforting to have that stability. At my age, routine becomes a necessity," replied Eleanor, serving herself more coffee. "Richard always said that discipline was the foundation of a well-lived life." "He was a sheriff, wasn't he? He must have been a very respected man," continued Stephanie, and there was something in the way she said it that made Eleanor look up from her plate. "Yes, very respected. He dedicated his entire life to the public safety of Pinewood," she said, noticing that Thunder had positioned himself again between her and the visitor. "Why do you ask?" "Oh, just curiosity. It must have been exciting to live with someone so important," Stephanie replied quickly, but averted her gaze. After breakfast, while Stephanie went upstairs to arrange her things, Eleanor decided to take a stroll through the library. It was her favorite morning ritual, a moment of connection with Richard's memories. But something was different. One of the shelves seemed disorganized, and when she went to check, she noticed that a small wooden box had disappeared. "How strange," she murmured to herself, trying to remember if she had moved the box recently. It was where she kept some of Richard's old letters, nothing very important, but its absence made her uncomfortable. Martha arrived punctually at 9 o'clock, as she had done for more than 15 years. She was a robust, middle-aged woman, with graying hair always tied in a bun and a warm smile that illuminated the manor. "Good morning, Mrs. Eleanor. I heard you have a visitor in the house," she said, hanging her coat on the entrance hook. "My niece Stephanie. She showed up yesterday as a surprise," explained Eleanor, and there was a hesitation in her voice that Martha, knowing her for so many years, immediately noticed. "Niece? I didn't know you had relatives in Pinewood," commented Martha, beginning to organize the kitchen utensils. "Neither did I know she was in the area," admitted Eleanor. "She's Isabel's daughter, or at least that's what she said." Martha stopped what she was doing and looked directly at her employer. "You're not sure?" "It's just that I can't remember her well, and you know how good my memory is for faces," said Eleanor, lowering her voice. At that moment, Stephanie came down the stairs, already dressed to go out. She wore casual but elegant clothes and carried a brand-name purse that seemed too expensive for someone who had presented herself as a simple visitor passing through. "Auntie, I'm going to take a walk around town, get to know Pinewood a bit. Do you need anything?" she asked. But her eyes seemed more interested in observing Martha than waiting for an answer. "No, dear. Enjoy yourself," replied Eleanor, introducing the two women. After Stephanie left, Martha approached Eleanor with a worried expression. "May I say something, Mrs. Eleanor?" "Of course, Martha. What is it?" "It's just that... I don't know, there's something about this young woman that doesn't inspire trust in me. And Thunder, just look at how agitated he's been since yesterday." It was true. The dog circulated around the house with a restlessness that wasn't characteristic of him. He seemed to sniff each corner, as if looking for something or someone. "You noticed it too," sighed Eleanor. "Perhaps it's just the paranoia of two old women." "Or perhaps it's instinct," replied Martha, drying her hands on her apron. "For you always taught me to trust what the heart says, didn't you?" While Martha worked, Eleanor decided to check Richard's office, a space she rarely visited since his departure. Everything seemed in place, but there was a sensation that someone had rummaged through things. The papers were slightly misaligned, and the drawer she always kept locked seemed to have been forced. Outside, the gardener, Walter, was pruning the rose bushes with his usual dedication, but when she approached the window, she noticed that he frequently looked at the gate, as if expecting someone or something. The uneasiness grew with each hour, and Eleanor began to question whether her decision to host Stephanie had been wise. Thunder didn't lie, and his instinct rarely failed. If the dog was alert, there was a reason for it. The third day of Stephanie's visit brought a denser fog than usual, enveloping the manor in an almost supernatural atmosphere. Eleanor awoke to the sound of Thunder walking restlessly down the hallway, his nails making a rhythmic noise on the wooden floor. "What is it, boy?" she whispered, finding the dog standing in front of the window that overlooked the back garden. Through the mist, she could distinguish a hooded figure near the side gate of the property. Her heart accelerated. In all the years living there, she had never witnessed anything like this. The figure remained motionless for a few minutes, as if observing the house before disappearing among the trees. Descending the stairs carefully to avoid making noise, Eleanor found the house silent. Stephanie was still asleep, or at least that's how it appeared. The guest room door was closed, but she couldn't shake the feeling that something was happening in the shadows. In the kitchen, while preparing her morning tea, she heard a muffled noise coming from the basement. It was a sound she hadn't heard in years. The basement had been sealed since Richard had stored some important documents there before his departure. The noise repeated, as if someone was moving heavy objects. "Walter," she called in a low voice, but she knew the gardener would only arrive later. Thunder positioned himself in front of the door that led to the basement, growling softly, a sound she rarely heard from the disciplined dog. She decided not to investigate alone and wait for Martha's arrival. When the housekeeper arrived, Eleanor immediately shared her concerns. "Martha, do you have the key to the basement?" "Yes, Mrs. Eleanor. Why do you ask?" "I heard noises from there this morning, and I saw a strange person in the garden." Martha frowned, concerned. "Let's take a look together." They descended the narrow stairs that led to the house's basement. The basement was exactly as Richard had left it, stacked. Boxes, furniture covered by sheets, and the air heavy with moisture and time. But there were footprints on the dusty floor, footprints that definitely weren't theirs. "Someone has been here," murmured Martha, pointing to the marks in the dust. Eleanor felt a shiver run down her spine. But who would have access? Only the... "3 of us have keys to the house." "3?" asked Martha. "You, me, and..." Eleanor stopped, realizing her conclusion. She had given a copy of the keys to Stephanie as a gesture of trust and practicality. They went back upstairs in silence, both lost in thought. When they reached the kitchen, Stephanie was there, already dressed and apparently ready to go out again. "Good morning, Auntie." "Good morning, Martha," she said cheerfully, but there was something forced about her smile. "I'm going to meet some friends for lunch. You don't mind, do you?" "Of course not, dear. Enjoy yourself," replied Eleanor, carefully observing each gesture of her niece. After Stephanie left, Walter arrived with a worried expression. "Mrs. Eleanor, I need to talk to you." "What is it, Walter?" "It's just that last night when I was leaving, I saw a dark car, parked across the street. This morning early, the same car was there again, and there's one more thing." He hesitated, as if fearing to worry her unnecessarily. "Speak, Walter." "There are voices coming from the abandoned warehouse that borders your property. Men's voices talking quietly. I tried to get closer to listen, but they left when they saw me." The puzzle was beginning to form in Eleanor's mind. Stephanie's presence, the noises in the basement, the hooded figure, the suspicious car, the voices in the warehouse, all of this couldn't be coincidence. "Martha, do you remember where Richard kept the important documents, those he said I should look for if I ever needed them?" "In the safe behind the painting in the library. Isn't it?" "No, not that one. There was another place, more secret. He mentioned it once, but..." Eleanor strained her memory, trying to remember Richard's words in his final days. He had been very specific about something, but the pain of loss had obscured many of those memories. Determined to clarify her suspicions, Eleanor went to Richard's office and began to search among his personal papers. In a side drawer, she found an old phone book. Leafing through it, she looked for the contact of Inspector Thomas, Richard's old colleague who had promised to help her if she ever needed it. "Thomas, this is Eleanor Richardson, Richard's wife." "Mrs. Eleanor, what a joy to hear your voice. How are you?" "Thomas, I need your help. Strange things are happening here at home and I'm beginning to get worried. Tell me everything." She reported the events of the last few days, Stephanie's unexpected arrival, Thunder's behavior, the noises in the basement, the suspicious figure in the garden. Thomas listened in silence, asking occasional questions. "Mrs. Eleanor, are you sure you know this, Stephanie? Richard never mentioned close relatives in the family." "That's exactly what worries me, Thomas. I can't remember her, and my memory has always been excellent. Listen, I'll make some discreet checks. Meanwhile, you need to be very careful. Don't leave this young woman alone in the house, and most importantly, trust Thunder's instinct. That dog was trained to sense danger." Hanging up the phone, Eleanor felt a mixture of relief and apprehension. Relief for having taken action, apprehension for what she might discover. When Stephanie returned in the late afternoon, she brought with her a small bag from a pet store. "Auntie, I brought a little present for Thunder. It's a special pâté, very nutritious." Eleanor thanked her politely, but something in her instincts screamed not to accept that gift. "How kind of you, dear, but Thunder has a very specific diet prescribed by the veterinarian. Better not to risk it." Stephanie's smile faltered for a fraction of a second, but she quickly composed herself. "Of course, Auntie. You know his needs better." That night, for the first time in her life, Eleanor locked her bedroom door from the inside. The morning arrived with a palpable restlessness in the air. Eleanor had slept poorly, waking at every noise, and Thunder had remained alert throughout the night, changing position several times as if patrolling invisible threats. Determined to discover the truth about Stephanie, she waited for the young woman to leave for her morning walk, a habit she had developed in the last few days, and headed to the most secret place in the house, Richard's personal safe, hidden behind the library fireplace. With trembling hands, she typed the combination that her husband had entrusted to her years ago. The safe opened, revealing documents, some jewelry, and at the bottom, a metal box she had never opened. Inside the box she found old photographs, newspaper clippings, and a folder with notes in Richard's characteristic handwriting. Her breath caught in her throat when she saw one of the photographs. Stephanie, visibly younger, was standing beside a middle-aged man whom she immediately recognized, Gerald Baker. The name Richard had mentioned with bitterness so many times in the last years of his life. "My God," she whispered, sitting heavily in the library armchair. Richard's notes told a dark story. Gerald had been his partner in the 1990s, in a real estate venture that ended in scandal and suspicions of irregularities. Richard had discovered incriminating evidence against Gerald, but never formally denounced him, carrying the weight of that decision until his final days. "If something happens to me, One of the last notes said, "These documents must reach the proper authorities. Gerald Baker cannot continue to go unpunished." A noise at the main entrance made her quickly put the documents back in the safe. Stephanie had returned earlier than usual and seemed agitated. "Auntie, is everything all right?" "You look pale," said Stephanie, approaching with a solicitude that now sounded completely false to Eleanor's ears. "Just a bit of fatigue, dear. Age catches up with all of us," she replied, forcing a smile. But Stephanie didn't seem convinced. Her eyes scanned the environment as if looking for signs that Eleanor had discovered. Something. When Martha arrived, she brought information that made Eleanor's blood run cold. "Mrs. Eleanor, I found this in the kitchen trash," she said, showing small pieces of wood. "It seems someone broke something." Eleanor immediately recognized the fragments. They were from the box that had disappeared from the library, the one where she kept Richard's old letters. Stephanie had not only stolen the box, but had destroyed it after examining its contents. "Martha, I need you to do something for me," said Eleanor when they were alone in the kitchen. "Call Inspector Thomas and tell him it's urgent, that he should come today if possible. Did something happen? I discovered who Stephanie really is, and she's not my niece." Martha's eyes widened. "What do you want me to do?" "Continue acting normally. We can't give any indication that we know anything, but stay alert to everything." During lunch, Stephanie seemed especially interested in knowing about the house routine for the next few days. "Auntie, do you have any commitments this week? Any scheduled visits?" "Nothing in particular. Why?" "Oh, just to organize myself. I thought about staying a few more days, if it's not an inconvenience." Eleanor forced another smile. "Of course not, dear." But internally, every fiber of her being screamed that she needed to get out of there as soon as possible. In the afternoon, when Stephanie went out again, Thomas finally arrived. He was a 60-year-old man with grey hair and a penetrating gaze who had served alongside Richard for decades. "Mrs. Eleanor, I did some checks on this Stephanie," he said, sitting in the living room. "There is no Stephanie in your family. Cousin Isabel never had children." "I suspected as much," she sighed. "And there's more, Thomas." She told him about the discovery of the photographs and the connection to Gerald Baker. Thomas listened attentively, making occasional notes. "That explains a lot," he said finally. "Gerald has been circulating in the region for a few weeks. Some colleagues commented that he's been holding meetings with local businessmen, but nobody knows exactly what about." "Thomas, I'm afraid. This woman has been here for 4 days, has access to the entire house, and is clearly looking for something. The documents that Richard gathered against Gerald, do you know where they are? Part of them is in the safe, but Richard mentioned that he had hidden the most important ones in another place. I never managed to discover where." Thomas stood up, looking out the window. "Mrs. Eleanor, I'll be direct with you. I need to place discreet surveillance on the house. If Gerald is behind this, the situation could be more dangerous than we imagine. Do whatever you think necessary. And one last thing, don't eat or drink anything this woman offers, and keep Thunder close by at all times." When Stephanie returned in the late afternoon, she brought with her a bouquet of flowers. "To brighten up the house, Auntie," she said, but there was something in her eyes that didn't match the affectionate gesture. Eleanor thanked her politely and asked Martha to put the flowers in a vase, but when the housekeeper went to arrange them, she found something hidden among the petals, a small electronic device that she immediately recognized as a microphone. The manor, which had sheltered so many secrets over the years, had now become the stage for a dangerous plot that connected the present to the dark past that Richard had tried to protect. That night, Eleanor remained awake, listening to every sound in the house. Thunder was more restless than ever, and she knew that the storm was just beginning. Stephanie wasn't just an imposter. She was a key piece in a much larger plan that involved revenge, greed, and secrets that some would prefer to see buried forever. The real battle was just beginning. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give us a like. Tell us what city you're watching from. We'll continue. The rain began to fall heavily on Thursday night, creating a melancholy symphony against the windows of the manor. Eleanor watched the drops run down the glass, knowing that each passing hour brought her closer to an inevitable confrontation. Stephanie had left right after dinner, claiming she would meet friends in downtown Pinewood. But Eleanor knew it wasn't a social gathering. Through the window, she had seen a dark car parked at the end of the street, the same one Walter had mentioned days before. "Martha, can you stay tonight?" she asked when the housekeeper was preparing to leave. "Of course, Mrs. Eleanor, I'm worried about leaving you alone with that woman." "We won't be alone," said Eleanor, pointing to Thunder, "and Thomas said there are people watching the house." But this information didn't completely reassure her. There was something in the air that presaged trouble, a tension that even Thunder seemed to feel with more intensity. Around 10 o'clock at night, the phone rang. It was Thomas, and his voice was grave. "Mrs. Eleanor, I got information about Stephanie. Her name is Stephanie Almeida, and she's been working for Gerald Baker for 3 years. She's been involved in other cases of infiltration into residences." "Infiltration?" repeated Eleanor, feeling her heart accelerate. "Usually as a domestic employee or distant relative, the objective is always the same, to locate incriminating documents or valuable objects. And now, Thomas, what should I do?" "Stay calm and continue acting normally. My team is positioned around the house. If anything happens, we'll be ready." But something was already happening. While she was talking to Thomas, Eleanor heard the unmistakable sound of the back door being opened. Stephanie had returned, but not alone. Low male voices echoed through the kitchen. "Thomas, they're here," she whispered into the phone. "How many?" "I don't know. I hear at least 2 voices besides hers." "Lock yourself in your room and don't come out. We're on our way." Eleanor hung up the phone and called for Martha, who was sleeping in the ground floor servants' quarters. But there was no response. Her blood froze when she realized it might already be too late. She descended the stairs silently. Thunder at her side. The house was plunged into darkness, but she could hear voices coming from the library. She approached cautiously and could distinguish 3 people, Stephanie and 2 men she didn't know. "Are you sure it's here?" said a deep male voice. "Richard was meticulous," Stephanie replied. "If he hid the most important documents, he must have left clues. I need more time to search." "We don't have more time," said another man. "Gerald wants this resolved soon. The old lady is suspicious." "Let me handle her," Stephanie replied coldly. "I've already gained her trust. Tomorrow I'll suggest she leave town for a few days to visit relatives. When she returns, we'll have found everything." Eleanor felt a shiver. They were planning something for her, and the mention of Martha as taken care of left her terrified. "And if she doesn't want to leave?" asked one of the men. "Then we'll have to be more persuasive," replied Stephanie, and there was a coldness in her voice that made Eleanor take a step back. At this moment, the old floorboard creaked under her feet. The sound echoed through the silent house like a gunshot. Immediately the voices stopped. "What was that?" whispered one of the men. Eleanor didn't wait to find out. She ran to the kitchen, Thunder running at her side. She needed to find Martha and get out of the house. But when she reached the housekeeper's room, she found the door open and the bed empty. "Martha?" she called softly, but there was no response. Hurried footsteps echoed down the hallway. They had heard her and were coming in her direction. "Mrs. Eleanor," shouted Stephanie, her voice losing all its feigned sweetness. "Where are you?" Eleanor knew every inch of that house. She quickly headed for the pantry, where there was a door that led to the basement. It was her only escape option. She descended the dark stairs, Thunder glued to her heels. The basement was cold and damp, but she knew the way to the emergency exit that Richard had installed years ago, a small door that led to the back garden. But when she tried to open the door, she discovered it was locked from the outside. They were trapped. She must have gone down to the basement, she heard Stephanie's voice coming from upstairs. "See if you can lock the top door." The sound of the door closing and a key turning in the lock confirmed her worst fears. They were trapped in the basement, and Stephanie and her accomplices had total control of the house. But Eleanor hadn't survived 72 years to surrender easily. She knew every secret of that basement, including the fact that there was an old telephone connected to an independent line that Richard had installed for emergencies. With trembling hands in the darkness, she found the device and dialed Thomas's number. Thomas, I'm trapped in the basement. They're in the house. Hold on, Mrs. Eleanor. We're entering now. From outside, she heard the sound of cars arriving rapidly, doors slamming, and voices shouting. The cavalry had arrived. But from the upper floor, she also heard sounds of struggle, objects being broken, and Stephanie shouting orders to her accomplices. The battle for Richard Richardson's house had begun. Thunder positioned himself in front of Eleanor, growling softly toward the stairs. Even in the dark, even trapped, the faithful companion was ready to defend her to the end. "It's okay, my friend," she whispered, caressing the dog's head. "Thomas is here. We'll get out of this." But in the depths of her heart, she knew the real battle was yet to come. Stephanie and Gerald wouldn't give up easily, and the secrets her husband had protected for so many years were about to come to light in a way she had never imagined. The sound of sirens cutting through the rainy night brought momentary relief to Eleanor, but the tension in the manor was far from over. From the basement, where she remained trapped with thunder, she could hear shouts, running footsteps, and the noise of furniture being knocked over on the upper floor. "Drop your weapons! Police!" echoed Thomas's authoritative voice throughout the house. But the response came in the form of more running and the unmistakable sound of windows being opened. Stephanie and her accomplices were trying to escape. "Don't let anyone out!" shouted another voice that Eleanor didn't recognize. Thunder was restless, growling softly and scratching at the basement door. The dog sensed that his mistress was in danger and fought against the confinement. Finally, after what seemed like hours but was only a few minutes, Eleanor heard footsteps descending the basement stairs and Thomas's familiar voice calling her name. "Mrs. Eleanor, are you down there?" "I'm here, Thomas. The door is locked." The sound of the key turning in the lock had never been so welcome. When the door opened, Thomas appeared with a flashlight, followed by 2 officers. "Are you all right?" he asked, helping her up the stairs. "I am, but what about Martha? I couldn't find her." "She's fine. We found her locked in the back shed. She was scared but unharmed." Relief took hold of Eleanor. When they reached the ground floor, the manor showed clear signs of the struggle that had occurred. Chairs toppled over, books scattered across the library floor, and the sensation that her home had been irreversibly violated. "Did you catch them all?" she asked. 2 men were detained trying to escape through the garden, explained Thomas, but Stephanie managed to get away. Eleanor felt a shiver. As long as Stephanie was free, she wouldn't feel safe. "Thomas, there's something I need to show you," she said, heading for the library. "I found documents of Richard's that might explain this whole situation." She opened the secret safe and removed the folder with the notes and photographs. Thomas examined everything carefully, making occasional notes. "This is gold, Mrs. Eleanor. With this evidence, we can finally prosecute Gerald Baker for the shady business dealings of the 1990s. But why now, after so many years? From what we've been able to ascertain, Gerald is trying to enter a major real estate development in the region. If these irregularities came to light, he would lose everything. That's why he sent Stephanie here, to find and destroy the evidence that Richard had gathered." Eleanor sat heavily in the library armchair. It all made sense now. Stephanie's unexpected arrival, the questions about the house routine, the constant search for documents. And now what happens? "Now you'll be under police protection until we arrest Stephanie and Gerald. They won't give up easily." As if his words were prophetic, at that moment the phone rang. Thomas answered. "Richardson Residence." The voice on the other end was clearly Gerald Baker's, even after so many years. "Thomas, I imagine you're there. I want to speak with Eleanor." "She has nothing to say to you, Gerald." "I think she does. After all, I have something that belongs to her." Eleanor felt her blood freeze. "What does he mean by that?" Thomas covered the phone and whispered, "He must be bluffing." But Gerald's voice continued. "If you want to see Martha again, Eleanor comes to the old lumber mill warehouse alone. You have 1 hour." The call was cut off, leaving a tense silence in the library. "He's lying," Thomas said immediately. "Martha is safe at the police station." But when they called to verify, the news was devastating. Martha had left the station 20 minutes ago, saying she would return home to get some personal items. No one had seen her since. "She's been kidnapped," said Eleanor, her voice trembling. "Because of me." "It wasn't because of you," Thomas replied firmly. "It was out of greed and revenge, but we won't let them harm her." "I'm going there," said Eleanor, rising with determination. "No way, it's too dangerous. Thomas, Martha is like a daughter to me. She's worked in this house for 15 years. I can't leave her in the hands of these criminals. Then we'll go together, but with a complete team." "No, Gerald has known Richard for decades. He knows that he wouldn't do anything that would put an innocent person at risk. If I don't go alone, he might hurt Martha." Thomas knew she was right. Men like Gerald were unpredictable when they felt cornered. "All right," he said, reluctantly. "But take a hidden communicator. We'll be listening to everything and ready to act." As she prepared for what could be the final confrontation of her life, Eleanor looked at Thunder. The dog seemed to understand the gravity of the situation and pressed his head against her leg, as if wanting to transmit all his strength and courage. "No, my friend," she said, caressing him. "This time you stay. I need to know you're safe." But, in Thunder's intelligent eyes, she could see the same determination she had seen in Richard's eyes so many times over the years. Loyalty knows no limits, and some bonds are unbreakable. The rain had stopped, but the air was still charged with tension when Eleanor left the manor for the last time that night. Behind her, the lights of the house that had been her refuge for decades seemed distant and fragile in the darkness. Ahead, a confrontation with ghosts from the past that she didn't even know existed awaited her. The old lumber mill warehouse was shrouded in darkness when Eleanor arrived, driving Thomas's car with hands that trembled slightly on the steering wheel. The abandoned structure, which had been closed for years, seemed even more sinister under the faint light of the few lamps that worked in the industrial yard. She discreetly checked the small communicator hidden in her blouse. Thomas and his team were strategically positioned around the location, but she knew she would have to face Gerald alone for the first crucial minutes. "Eleanor!" the voice echoed from the shadows of the warehouse. "I thought you wouldn't come." Gerald Baker emerged from the darkness, and she was shocked by his appearance. The man she had known decades ago was visibly aged, with graying hair and eyes that reflected a deep bitterness. Beside him, Stephanie observed her with a coldness that contrasted completely with the sweet young woman who had presented herself a week before. "Where is Martha?" Eleanor asked directly, without preamble. "She's safe," replied Gerald, "for now." "What do you want, Gerald? After so many years, why now?" He laughed bitterly. "After so many years? Eleanor, you have no idea what your husband did to me. Richard destroyed my life with his suspicions and investigations. Richard only discovered the truth about your irregular business dealings. The truth?" Gerald walked in circles around her like a predator. "The truth is that your husband was jealous of my success. He couldn't accept that I had prospered more than him." Eleanor remained calm, knowing that Thomas was listening to every word. "That's not true, and you know it, isn't it? Then why did he never officially report me? Why did he just gather evidence and keep it as secret weapons?" This question had tormented Eleanor since she discovered the documents. Why had Richard never taken the evidence to the authorities? "Because he was an honorable man," she said finally. "And even while suspecting you, he didn't want to destroy your family without being absolutely certain." "Family?" Stephanie spoke for the first time, her voice laden with emotion. "He destroyed our family." Eleanor looked at the young woman in confusion. "What are you talking about?" "She's my daughter, Eleanor," said Gerald, placing his hand on Stephanie's shoulder. "And because of Richard's suspicions, because of the rumors he spread, we lost everything. My wife died in shame, and Stephanie grew up in poverty because no one would do business with me anymore." The revelation hit Eleanor like a punch. Stephanie wasn't just a hired criminal, she was Gerald's daughter, driven by personal revenge. "But that doesn't justify what you're doing," she said. "Martha is innocent." "Like I was innocent when Richard ruined my reputation?" replied Gerald. "Now you're going to give me all the documents he gathered against me, or your dear housekeeper will pay the price." "Where is she?" insisted Eleanor. Gerald made a signal and Stephanie disappeared into the shadows of the warehouse. Minutes later, she returned pushing Martha, who was tied up but apparently unharmed. "Mrs. Eleanor," shouted Martha, "you shouldn't have come." "It's okay, Martha. We're going to leave here together." "Very touching," said Gerald sarcastically. "But first, the documents, all of them." Eleanor took a deep breath. It was the moment of truth. "Gerald, there's something you don't know about these documents." "What?" "Richard discovered you were innocent." The silence that followed was deafening. Gerald stopped walking, and Stephanie looked at her father in confusion. "What did you say?" "Richard spent the last years of his life discreetly investigating the case. He discovered that you had been deceived by your own partners. The irregularities were committed without your knowledge." Gerald shook his head violently. "That's a lie." "It's not a lie," continued Eleanor, taking from her pocket a sheet of paper she had secretly kept. "This is a letter that Richard wrote shortly before he passed away. He was planning to seek you out to apologize and deliver the evidence that would exonerate you." With trembling hands, Gerald took the letter and read it under the faint light. As he read, his expression gradually changed from anger to incredulity, and then to something that seemed like despair. "No, this can't be true," he murmured. "Dad?" Stephanie approached, confused. "What does it say?" Gerald let himself fall heavily onto an abandoned crate, the letter fluttering in his hands. He was trying to clear me. He discovered who really harmed me and wanted to help me restore my reputation." The irony of the situation was devastating. All the revenge, all the suffering, all the search for the documents, all based on a misunderstanding that had lasted for decades. "Why did Richard never seek me out?" asked Gerald, his voice broken. "Because he passed away before he could do so," replied Eleanor gently. "But he left clear instructions for me to deliver everything to the authorities to clear your name." Stephanie looked at her father and then at Eleanor, the reality of the situation finally settling in. We made a terrible mistake." At that moment, the lights of the warehouse turned on, and Thomas appeared with his team, guns drawn but lowered when they saw that the situation had completely changed. "Is everything under control?" he asked cautiously. Eleanor nodded, heading to free Martha. "It is, Thomas, finally it is." Gerald remained seated, reading and rereading Richard's letter. Decades of anger and resentment crumbled in the face of the truth he had never known. "Eleanor," he said finally, his voice almost inaudible, "I ask for forgiveness for everything." She stopped untying Martha and looked at the man who had terrorized her week. She saw in him not a villain but a victim of circumstances, a man who had carried an unnecessary wound for too long. "Gerald," she said softly, "Richard would also ask for forgiveness if he were here. Both of you were victims of a misunderstanding that grew until it became a tragedy." The truth, finally revealed after so many years, brought not only justice but also an opportunity for healing for wounds that had remained open for too long. The abandoned warehouse, a silent witness to so many secrets, had finally seen the light of truth prevail over the shadows of the past. 3 months had passed since that transformative night at the lumber mill warehouse. Autumn had arrived in Pinewood with its vibrant colors, painting the pine trees and mountains with golden hues that seemed to symbolize a new beginning for everyone involved in that story. Eleanor was on her favorite porch, watching thunder play in the garden with a vitality he hadn't shown in years. The dog seemed to have rejuvenated since the tension had dissipated from the house, as if he too had felt the weight of the secrets that had now been revealed. "Mrs. Eleanor, the tea is ready," announced Martha, bringing the porcelain tray she so appreciated. The housekeeper had fully recovered from the scare of those difficult days and returned to her routine with the same dedication as always. "Thank you, Martha. Sit with me for a while." It was a habit they had developed in recent weeks, these moments of conversation in the late afternoon, where employer and employee simply became two friends sharing life. "You're different," observed Martha, serving the tea. Lighter, I would say. Eleanor smiled. It's true. I feel as if a gigantic weight has been lifted from my shoulders. I didn't know I was carrying Richard's secrets until they were finally revealed. The sound of the doorbell interrupted their conversation. Through the window, they saw a familiar car parking at the gate. It was Thomas, who had become a regular visitor since the events of that fateful week. "Good afternoon, ladies," he greeted, climbing the porch steps. "How are you?" "Well, thank you. And you, how is the case going?" Thomas sat in the chair Eleanor offered him, accepting a cup of tea. "All charges against Gerald have been dropped. Richard's documents not only exonerated him, but also led to the arrest of those truly responsible for the irregularities of the 90s. "And Gerald? How is he?" "Better. Much better, actually. He managed to recover some of his legitimate businesses, and his reputation is gradually being restored. More importantly, he and Stephanie are rebuilding their relationship." Eleanor nodded, satisfied. There was something deeply comforting in knowing that a family had been reunited after so many years of unnecessary suffering. "Speaking of Stephanie," continued Thomas, "she asked me to deliver this to you." He extended an elegant envelope. Inside, there was a handwritten letter with delicate and careful calligraphy. "Dear Mrs. Eleanor," she read aloud, "there are not enough words to express my remorse for the actions I committed in your home. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I hope that one day you can understand that I acted driven by the pain and anger I had carried since childhood. Discovering the truth about my father and about Mr. Richard completely changed my perspective on the past. I hope to honor your husband's memory by dedicating my life to helping other families facing similar misunderstandings. With affection and respect, Stephanie." A solitary tear slipped down Eleanor's face. Poor child, she grew up carrying a wound that wasn't even hers. "Will you respond?" asked Martha. "Of course I will, and I'll invite her to tea. It's time to transform enmities into friendships." Thomas smiled. "Mrs. Eleanor, you are an extraordinary woman. I don't know if I would have so much generosity." "Thomas, I've learned a lot in these past months. I learned that holding grudges is like carrying stones in your heart. You only hurt yourself. And I learned that the truth, even when it takes time to appear, always prevails." The sun was beginning to set behind the mountains, creating a spectacle of colors that perfectly reflected the moment of renewal everyone was experiencing. Thunder approached the group on the porch, lying at Eleanor's feet with the satisfaction of a guardian who had fulfilled his mission. "And you, my faithful companion," she said, caressing the dog's head, "were the hero of this entire story. Your instincts protected me when I needed it most." "Speaking of protection," said Thomas, "we received an interesting proposal. The county sheriff's office is considering creating a guard dog program for elderly people who live alone. They want to use your story as inspiration." Eleanor laughed. "Thunder famous, Richard would be proud." As night approached, Thomas said goodbye, promising to return the following week for more of these conversations that had become so precious to everyone. When they were alone, Martha helped Eleanor collect the teacups. "Mrs. Eleanor, may I ask a question?" "Of course, dear. Are you no longer afraid of living alone in this big house?" Eleanor looked around the manor that had been her home for decades. The walls that once seemed to guard dark secrets now radiated peace and stories of love and loyalty. "No, Martha, I'm not afraid anymore. I discovered that this house wasn't haunted by the past. It was protected by it. Each memory of Richard, each lesson I learned, each moment of love we lived here, all of this strengthens me." Later, when the house was quiet and Martha had retired, Eleanor made her final nightly rounds. She passed through the library where Richard's documents now rested safely, their mission finally fulfilled. She passed through the office, where the photographs in the safe told a story of redemption instead of revenge. In her bedroom, as she prepared for sleep, she looked out the window at the garden bathed in moonlight. Thunder was in his favorite position, lying near the rose bush that Richard had planted years ago. "Good night, my love," she whispered to Richard's photograph on her bedside table. "Mission accomplished. Gerald is free, Stephanie has found peace, and our legacy of justice and truth lives on. A gentle breeze made the curtains dance, and for a moment, Eleanor felt as if Richard were there, approving the decisions she had. Fida Pinewood slept peacefully that night, and in the Richardson Manor, for the first time in months, all its inhabitants, human and canine, rested in deep peace, knowing that sometimes the most beautiful endings are those that bring not only justice but also healing and forgiveness. The manor would continue to stand for many years to come, no longer as a guardian of secrets, but as a witness that truth, love, and loyalty